What's going to happen in the Canadian real estate market in 2021? Are we going to see another year of double-digit price growth or a massive market correction? We're breaking it down on this episode of Bald Prairie Real Estate. It's time to start looking at what is going to happen in the Canadian real estate market in 2021. I've broken down a number of economic forecasts and projections for the Canadian housing market. We're going to walk through it all so you know what is going to happen. These projections go from as wide-ranging as double-digit decreases to double-digit increases. So how the heck do we make heads and tails of this? I want to start off by talking about where we are currently right now. Then we're going to break down all those different forecasts. And at the end, I'm going to talk to you about what I see happening, some trends I think you should keep an eye on so you know what's going to happen this year in the Canadian real estate market. But of course, before we get going, we're going to start off with another one of my terrible jokes. The other day I was reading the news and I heard about this optometrist that made the world's largest pair of eyeglasses. I hear it was a huge spectacle. Where are we starting 2021? Well, let's quickly talk about what happened in 2020, where we saw a record year for the number of homes sold. 551,000 houses sold in Canada in 2020. That's the most homes ever sold in 1 year. July 2020, most houses sold in a month ever in Canada. And December was the busiest December we've had in Canada. So we're starting off the year where we've got demand higher than the 5-year averages and inventory levels well below 5-year averages in most cities. This is especially true in the single family market, where it's not unheard of in some of these cities to see 40, 50, 60 offers on properties and them sell for over $100,000 more than asking price. Want to know what's going on in your city in Canada right now? Right here is my most recent Canadian housing market update. That'll tell you what's going on in your city. Probably the most comprehensive Canadian market update on YouTube. So check that out if you want to know more. So we're starting off the year where we've got low inventory levels, low interest rates, strong demand. What do you think that's doing to prices? Well, it's been pushing them up 15%. That's what the benchmark price went up in Canada in 2020. Middle of the pandemic, prices saw massive increases. So let's jump into the forecast and see what's going to happen for 2021. So I went through all of this data with a fine-tooth comb. I don't own a comb. So what I wanted to understand was what they are predicting, but also why and how they came about that. Because it is really easy to just skim these articles or see in the news that CMHC is predicting a 50% decline in house prices this year. You quickly jump in front of the camera, you make a video about it saying prices are coming down 50%, and now people are pretty confused. Don't worry, I'm gonna get to CMHC's prediction that they made in just a minute. Now, along with these predictions, they talked about prices, but also the number of homes that were expected to sell. The kind of consensus was an anticipated 550 to 600,000 homes sold this year in Canada. For some context, 2020 saw the most homes ever sold in Canadian history in 1 year at 551,000 homes. So if they're predicting that many houses to sell and maybe even more, you can probably already see where some of these predictions are going with prices. Now, I tried to memorize all this data. I couldn't, so I got my iPad in front of me here. I'll be looking down on some of these notes. So I made sure I get all these numbers right because the spread is pretty big. Let's start off with TD first though. TD predicted a 7% decrease in house prices for 2021. Now, this prediction was made in October. I expect now that this is a little bit out of date and we should see a more revised, probably more positive outlook on the Canadian real estate market from TD. But at the time of recording, that wasn't available. RBC's forecast was for an 8.5% increase in house prices in 2021. They also projected to see closer to that 600,000 homes sold in 2021. Royal LePage, that's my company, they projected a 5.5% increase in the benchmark price for houses in Canada. Want to know more about the benchmark price, how it gets calculated? Right here, link to a video that you can check out on that as well. What about CIBC, big bank? They split theirs up into three. They have kind of their worst case, their middle of the road, and their best case scenario. So worst case was they saw prices declining by about 7%. Their kind of middle of the road saw a 2.5% increase in house prices, and the best case scenario saw an 11% increase in prices. How about Moody's? Now, this forecast comes from September again, so it's one of the older ones. I think it's a little more outdated. And Moody's has been, I would say, rather pessimistic on Canadian real estate. They projected in May of 2020 that we were going to see prices decrease from anywhere from about 8 to 30%. That was, I think, the most negative outlook on the Canadian real estate market at the time. They are now showing a 7% decrease in house prices. Again, that is from September 2020 when they made that forecast. There hasn't been an updated one from them yet. RE/MAX was projecting between a 4 and a 6% increase in house prices in Canada in 2021. Capital Economics, they were showing between a 5 and a 7% increase in house prices. And then the Canadian Association of Realtors, or the Canadian Real Estate Association, CREA, was projecting a 9.1% increase in house prices across Canada in 2021. Okay, now let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that is CMHC's prediction of a 50% decline in house prices in Canada in 2021. This popped up in the last couple of days of January, just a day before I recorded this video. And of course, the internet went nuts over this. We saw a lot of news articles talking about this, saw a couple of YouTube videos where people are saying CMHC is now predicting the Canadian real estate market is going to crash. It's coming down by 50%. Except that's not true at all. That's not what CMHC said in any way, shape, or form. If you actually went through and read their report and their different scenarios, they were just doing simulations and modeling to see what would happen if certain parameters were met. So yes, they did have a scenario where they saw prices potentially coming down by 48%. For that to happen, we had to see depressionary economic conditions, no government support, a number of other factors, including a cyber attack that paralyzed the Canadian government. That's what it took to get to that type of prediction modeling. But they made it very clear, if you read through the report, that they are not making that prediction for the Canadian real estate market. They've said in no way, shape, or form is that their prediction. That was just some of the modeling that they did. So any of these headlines in the news or YouTube videos you're seeing that CMHC says prices are coming down 50%, that's just not true at all. A lot of people didn't go through and actually read what CMHC was doing and why they were doing it. Trust me, I've been pretty critical of CMHC in the past and some of their predictions, especially through 2020 and sticking to very pessimistic outlooks on the Canadian real estate market. They, as of January 23rd, 2021, have not made any predictions on the Canadian real estate market. They've made no forecast, nothing. If and when they do, and they usually do have housing market outlooks, I will be sure to cover it on this and you guys will know what they've said. So, do I think you should buy a house in Canada this year and what I think is going to happen in the Canadian housing market? Well, I can answer the first one right here. That is my video on whether you should buy a house this year in Canada. I've got a number of reasons why you should and a couple of reasons why you shouldn't. So check that one out. But if you are thinking about buying a house this year and you would like a great real estate agent recommendation, get a hold of me. My contact information will be below and I'd be happy to set you up with a fantastic agent in your area. So there's 3 trends I want you to keep an eye on that I think are going to be important factors for the Canadian real estate market in 2021. The first one's going to be those continued low interest rates. The Bank of Canada has committed to keeping those rates low. That's going to continue to incentivize people to go out and purchase homes because most people, when they think about buying a home, they don't necessarily think of the purchase price. They think of the actual payment. So now those payments are lower for that same house. Now this tends to be a temporary solution because usually you see prices increase, but it's got people thinking about it because those interest rates are so low. So that I expect to continue through 2021. But if you do see interest rates start to rise, that could put a little bit of a damper on demand and potentially prices. So keep an eye on interest rates and what's happening there. The next one, I'm calling it the return of the rental market. This is something I think is going to be very important in the back half of 2021, and I think it's going to coincide with some of the economic recovery that's being forecast in the back half of 2021. There's 3 things that I think are really important here to keep an eye on. Immigration, I expect immigration to ramp up in the back half of 2021. The government of Canada has already said their goal for 2021, 22, and 23 is about 400,000 new Canadians in each one of those years. The last time Canada had 400,000 new Canadians was 1912, and the previous highest year was 2019, where there's about 320,000 new Canadians. So that's going to add a lot of people that are looking for housing. And for the most part, studies I've read show that new Canadians rent on average for 3 years before they purchase. So those new Canadians are going to drive that rental market that's a little soft right now. The next is going to be the return of in-person classes. We are going to see universities go back to in-person classes, most likely for the fall semester of 2021. That's when we're going to see that. That will again drive the rental market. And the last part is going to be tourism. We are going to see flights return and the borders are going to open here. Again, I think all of this in the back half of the year, and that Airbnb and the travel market is going to help drive that rental market a little bit stronger. So that's what's going to be driving the rental market, which when the rental market starts to pick back up, it is going to push the rest of the real estate market a little bit as well. The last trend I want you to keep an eye on is inventory. The inventory levels are what drive prices both up and down. For quick reference, anything below 3 months worth of inventory, that's considered a seller's market. 3 to 6 months inventory, that is going to be a balanced market. 6 months or more inventory, that's where you're now in a full-on buyer's market. There are many cities, the GTA is one of them, where not only below 3 months of inventory, in some cities they're below 2 weeks worth of inventory. Of course, that is driving up prices. We're seeing places, like I said earlier, 40, 50, 60 offers on them, going for like 100 grand over ask. That means there's 40, 50, 60 other people still out looking for houses. That's going to continue to drive prices up. If you see inventory levels starting to increase, that's signs of it trending maybe to a bounce market or even to a buyer's market. That will of course drive prices down. So keep an eye on inventory levels to have an indication as to where things are going. So what do I think is going to happen in the Canadian housing market in 2021? Well, if we continue to see places where we see 40, 50, 60 offers on them, that's going to continue to drive prices up. That means there's 40, 50, 60 other people out looking for a house that didn't get that one, that have to go buy something else. So I wouldn't be surprised to see prices go up 5, 7, maybe even 10% this year. Now that is nationally. I like to break down on my real estate market updates each different city because there's big differences between them. So check that out if you want a more detailed breakdown. I'll put the link to that in the description. I want to know, what do you guys think is going to happen? Are we going to see prices continue to increase, or are you seeing something that might push prices down? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. If you're a first-time homebuyer, you probably got a lot of questions. Don't worry, I got you covered. Right here is my first-time homebuyer playlist, going to answer all of those questions. If you want to check out the Canadian housing market update, right here will be a link to my most recent one. And as always, guys, thanks very much for watching.